All right, so we're going to review factoring. So on this first one, we can assume that the 45 was already factored out. So now you're looking inside at each term. Is there anything they have in common? They both have y's in common. So I'm going to write the 45 down. It stays there. So we're going to pull out some y's. So when you look back at this, we have 8 y's being multiplied there. We only have 5 there. So the most we can pull out of both terms would be 5 of them. Then when we're trying to figure out what we have left over, whatever it is that you factored out, okay, is going to get multiplied by what you have left in there. So working backwards, when we factor this out, we actually divide each term by y over fifth, but by y to the fifth. So if I divide each term by y to the fifth, had 8 y's, I pulled 5 of those out, so now I have 3 left. And over here, I won't have any y's left because I pulled them all out and have 30. If you want to check it, you can go back and take this and do distributive property to check to see if you get the same thing as that. All right, number 2, first look for GCF. We don't have any factors in common. Then we notice that the first term is a perfect square. Its square root is 3b. And then we have our subtraction. And then we have a perfect square back here also. Its square root is 1. So when you have a perfect square minus a perfect square, you can actually, it's a special case. So we've got our 3b times 3b gives us the first term. And then we're going to take the last term times the last term to get 1. We're going to use a 1 in those spots. All right, so our first term times first term is 9b squared. Last term times last term is 1. In order to get a negative 1, these two signs would have to be different. So one of them would have to be plus, one would be negative. The reason we don't have a middle term in here, the reason we don't have a b term in there, is because if you did inner and outer, you'd get a positive 3b there, and here you get a negative 3b, and they would cancel out. So that's how it works out. On number 3, GCF, there's no GCF, but we do notice that the first term is a perfect square. Its square root is 2x. The last term is a perfect square. Its square root is 3. Now, in order for this to work, when we multiply these two, we have to get half of the middle. So half of the middle, half of 12 is 6. And when you multiply 2x times 3, you get 6x. All right, if that did not work, okay, that makes a special case. But if it didn't work, we'd have to go through and do factor by grouping or some other method to factor. But when this works, when we have this special case going on right here, when it all works out, it makes the factoring much easier. So we're going to have a 2x times 2x in the front to give our first 4x squared. And the last term, we're going to do our 3 times 3 to give us the 9. Now, this goes with a bigger number, we always say, but when you actually do this, you get a 6x in both of them, so they're the same number. But this means the signs are the same. So the signs are the same, and they're both positive. You can also write it as 2x plus 3 squared. So you may see that sometime. On number 4, we do have a GCF. We have a 4 that we can factor out of there. That leaves a d squared plus 3d minus 4. All right, we can factor the last part again, all right, because factoring this is a lot like factoring anything else. If we have the number 12, we'd factor 3 times 4. Well, the 4 can go down farther. So really what we've done there is we've taken this and we have factored it into the 4 and that. But this one can factor farther into those two. So we write the factors of 4 back here in the back. It's 1 times 4. And we ask ourselves, if we subtract the 1 times 4, do we get the middle term? So this tells you if you add or subtract the factors you're looking for. It tells you which one to do, add or subtract, and you're trying to get the middle. So yes, if we subtract 1 and 4, we do get 3. So that means this will work. So I'm going to put the 1 and the 4 back here, and the D out front. So looking back, we've got our first times first gives us the first, and last times last gives us the last. This sign goes with a bigger number, and this tells us that the signs are different. So if that's a plus, this would be a minus. All right, this next one, we do have a GCF. Put some arrows in there. When we're factoring, it's all actually equal. Just think the arrows might keep everything straight for you. All right. So when we factor on this one, all right, our lead coefficient is a negative, and we never like to lead with a negative. Our little backwards FOILing methods won't work with a negative out front, so we always factor out the negative. And then we're going to look at our numbers. We've got a 6, a 21, and an 18. We can factor 3 out of each one of those. And then you look at the variables. Do we have any variables that appear in all of them? And we have an x appears in all of them. So when you go over here and you divide each term by that negative 3x that we just pulled out of there, it's going to tell us what we have left. So when we divide the first term by the negative 3x, we're going to get 2y squared. We factor out or divide the 21 by the negative 3x, you're going to get a negative 7y. And when you divide out you have the negative 18x and divide by negative 3, we get a positive 6. And this one will factor farther. So we're going to still have our negative 3x, but then this will factor out farther. So let me go up here, find an empty spot, and let me go through factor by grouping with you. All right, so if we have this 2y squared minus 7y plus 6, and we want to factor by grouping, what you do is you take the first and the last numbers, you multiply those, and that answer, you write its factors. 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. And we follow the same or the similar rules. Which of these factors add up to 7? And we know that 3 and 4 add up to 7. So now the first term we're going to leave there, and the last term we're going to leave. But we're going to do something that a lot of people call split the middle. So we're going to take that negative 7y right there, and we're going to split it using the 3 and the 4. So we're going to have a 3y and a 4y. So those numbers tell us what to put there and here. Now, this tells us the signs of these two. Still, these rules will still apply. The signs will be the same, and they'll both be negative. From here, we're going to look at the first two, because now we're factor by grouping. We're going to look at the first two and the last two and see what we can factor out of those. We can factor out a y out of the first set, leaving us 2y minus 3. And we can factor out a negative 2 out of the last, leaving a 2y minus 3. Whatever this sign is right here, you always factor it out. All right, now, when we're looking at this, we're going to look at the first part and the last part and see what those two have in common. So when you look at this first part and you look at the last part, you see that we have a 2y minus 3 in common. So I'm going to put that down here. 2y minus 3 is going to be pulled out of there. We pull the 2y minus 3 out of both terms. That leaves you the y minus 2. And that goes here. All right, that's part 1 of this video.